I know, I had to.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Yeah, it works.
You have enough space.
Everybody hears
Jose,
me.
can you
I don't need
please,
a microphone.
her mic, okay.
Jose, it's okay.
How do you manage this?
That's taking up too much time.
November 18th?
January.
Did you say November?
Everybody knew what I
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay. Chair Baumel,
I am here on the right day.
Vice Chair Forbes,
Yes, ma'am.
Board Member LaCour,
Yes.
Board Member Bravo,
Yes.
Board Member Bales.
Yes.
Board
Yes.
Member Eterai is absent. Chair, you have a quorum. Jose, can you check Carolyn's mic? Because we cannot hear her.
You're not.
In the room, it's hard to hear her.
Get closer to it. See.
Just got a heard on TV.
Someone's watching you? Wow. Must be a family member.
Here, Carolyn, why don't you sit here and I'll sit over there and we can.
Oh, you want to sit in between the two
Or
of
just-
us? Why don't you
Not
sit-
really,
why don't
but,
you sit in, Jonathan?
Yeah, just somewhere where else so we can.
Here, sit in Jonathan's
We don't
chair.
have to have a long delay for tech.
Help you over there. I'm just telling you.
Yes.
Get away from us. You and Tony can hang out over there. Tony's fun to sit next to.
I'm moving.
As long as you bring him some snacks.
Okay.
Do that.
And we're back.
Darn.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few words. Thank you for being here tonight. Welcome back. Happy New Year to our Planning and Zoning Board. Let's get to work.
Okay. Can
Wow, that was good.
hear it?
Madam Chair, I have, if I may.
I think we have to wait till after the approval of minutes, and then you can
Okay.
do your shtick.
I move to approve the minutes.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, motion carries.
Well, there we go. We're moving right on to the, we have to do ordinances first. We can't move that around. Start with applications.
You can take things out of order. You just reset the agenda.
Here, I'll do it right now. Hang on.
Yeah, I'd like to motion to, I have a two-phase motion. One is to bring all applications before the ordinances.
Okay.
And the second is to approve applications 5A through 5E with staff conditions.
Can we do one at a time?
Sure.
Okay. So the motion that Ms. LaCour has made is to move agenda item 5 and all the applications in there before 4.
And I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Bravo.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All
Any
right.
opposed, motion carries.
Second motion is to approve applications 5A through 5E as a consent item with staff conditions.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, motion carries.
Is there time out. Is there any member of the audience who wants to address the board on any of those items? 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D, or 5E? Those
No.
are the wall signs.
Knowing you just got approved.
Yeah, you're about to be approved, so
Knowing that all wall signs have been approved.
it looks like
with
there's
whatever staff
so
conditions.
no one
there
wants to
might
speak
be.
on any of those items, and the last one is
I don't blame you. I wouldn't speak either.
9040 Abbott Avenue. Does anyone want to speak about that? It's about to be approved, so if you're okay with it being approved, all right. I'm getting the perfect. But Ruben did. Yeah,
Wait,
yeah,
hang
thanks.
on.
It's an addition, right? Is that your intent to?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we had a unanimous,
And we've heard no one in the audience against it, and there was a unanimous approval.
yeah, they,
With
yeah,
staff conditions.
everything is approved with staff conditions. Hi.
Good luck,
This is
guys.
live local. This is,
Okay, great, thank you.
yeah. I just want to tell you, videoing
Did
is
we vote?
fine, but it runs on a live feed. So you can always go back and check the video. Okay? Okay, great.
9F.
All right, I think we're at 5F.
So we have, 5F and 5G, and Madam Chair, with your permission, I'll read my little
Yes,
All right.
please.
Okay. Tonight's meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board is an in-person meeting as set forth in the Town Code. Applications 5F and 5G on this evening's meeting agenda are quasi-judicial in nature. For each application, following the presentations by staff and the applicant, the board can take public comment. They can then close public comment, afford the applicant an opportunity for rebuttal, and deliberate on the resolution. The quasi-judicial procedures require this board to consider the evidence presented to it and base their decision on the applicable law and primarily on the evidence presented, whether by the applicant, staff, or members of the public. In this case, the applicable law includes the standards for issuance of design review approval under Section 90-19 of the Town Code, as well as the design guidelines. The evidence considered must be substantial, competent evidence. This means testimony or other evidence based on personal observation or relevant expert testimony that a reasonable mind would accept as adequate to support a conclusion. It is not a popularity contest. It cannot be based solely on non-expert opinions, no matter how fervent those opinions might be. Everyone who seeks to speak on an item should be given an opportunity to speak. If you intend to provide testimony as to any of the applications considered tonight, you should be sworn in before your testimony is taken. Please know if you do speak, you may be subject to cross-examination. If you refuse either to be cross-examined or to be sworn, your testimony will be considered in that context and given its due weight. The general public will not be permitted to cross-examine witnesses, but the public may request the board to direct questions on their behalf to either staff or the applicant. At this time, anyone who wishes to speak should be sworn in. We have a visiting clerk this evening, and I'd ask that she administer the oath or affirmation. If you intend to speak, please stand and raise your right hand if you're appearing on 5F or 5G or any other application or any other item on tonight's agenda.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth and nothing but the truth? You may be seated.
Thank you. And Madam Visiting Clerk, can you confirm compliance with the advertising and notice requirements for these two?
Confirmed.
Thank you. And then finally, Madam Chair and board members, have any of you had any ex parte communications with any of the applicant, with either of the two applicants tonight?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Please state who you spoke to and what it was about.
Lulu Swedrow and Zalmi Shapiro about their fantastic upcoming project.
Okay.
Wow.
Which item is that one? The Carlisle or the Harding?
On 9260 Carlisle.
Carlisle.
This one.
Got it. Oh, this one, the first one. Okay. Anyone else speak to anyone?
No.
Nope. Nope.
Okay. Madam Chair, after you.
We're jumping right into the fine. Judith Frankel, Town Planner.
Good evening, Judith Frankel, Town Planner. This is item 5F. The subject property is located at 9260 Carlisle Avenue in the H30B zoning district. Application is to construct a new two-story single-family home on a double lot. Proposed project includes a pool, recreation area raised to the level of the first floor of the home. The exterior design elements on the front facade include arched windows and doors, dark bronze window and door frames, stucco lime wash, wall texture, iron railings, and a pitched roof with brown-gray flat concrete roof. Significant landscaping is proposed to complement the home's design style. 7 trees, 45 shrubs, and 5 shade-producing street trees are required and have been provided on the landscape plan. There we go. Thank you, Jose. The proposed home is 30 feet, the crown of the road to the tie beam as required. Minimum side setbacks, because this is a 100-foot wide lot, is 10 feet, which has been provided. I noted in the staff report that the average setback calculations for the first and second floor were not provided per the new ordinance that allows for the average side setbacks. Since this report was submitted, the architect had worked on preparing those calculations, and I believe they're going to show them to you tonight. My review of it felt that they could meet the average setbacks, but I was asking for the calculations, which they're prepared to provide via diagram. The project includes a 5-foot high wall and fence at the front property line, which you can see in this image. The first 2 feet height is a stucco knee wall with a 3-foot metal railing above, no more than 50% opacity per code. There's a rear recreation area. You can see on the site plan it's set back 5 feet from the property line to allow for the higher retaining walls around that recreation area. The applicant and the architect is here if you have any questions.
Okay. Please come on up, state your name and address for the record. And I think that we also should point out this is not a standard lot.
Correct. It's a double lot.
Yeah.
It's
Just
also not, it's a parallelogram. It's also not exactly square. Yes, so Judith mentioned about the area calculations.
Sorry, can you please state your name and
Oh,
address
right,
for the record?
Sorry, Laurie Swedrow, nickname Lulu. So take your pick. Swedrow, I'm an architect with Roger Piper. The owners retained us for their new home. They're residents of Surfside, and they're building this home for themselves and their young family. This is the area additional setback calculations that Judith asked in the staff report. So as the previous items on your agenda, I too would like to ask, right? Let's approve based on staff. That's what I'm asking of you. But I'd be happy to conclude the set or answer questions. I also sent Judith a clients contacted me a few days ago, which tends to happen. You know, the submission was a month ago, and they had bought the roof, so they felt there would be less impact to the roof than Gabe. Judith that could be also brought here, and so we're asking based on.
do you have the images with you?
Yeah.
You can disperse those.
Sure. So
Does the roof pitch change or anything change about the, are they just,
pitch would change.
Ms. Swedrow, please speak into the mic.
Oh, they
Sorry,
can't hear
the
you.
roof pitch would change at the front, above the front door. Instead of a gable, they would like to do a hip.
Okay.
The roof. So that I sent that to Judith as a comparison, which I have with me here. But
Yeah, go ahead and bring those up.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
can you bring it up on the,
Well, it was something they asked for. I mean, I've seen it, so I understand what they did. It's an enhancement, actually.
So I did email to Judith the comparison of, the calculations for the additional setback.
You can bring those up and we'll
And
take
I
a look.
also-
Is it just one copy or? Oh, okay. Okay.
If you
It
want,
is a comparison of showing
Yeah,
the
this
two
is
that
better.
shows that it's not that great of a change or revision to the architecture. Traditional modern style home with arched windows that are as tall and as possible on the first level. Oh, you do.
I have one question.
no, there is, yeah.
I have one question while Judith is pulling that up. How does the decking and the turf factor into the pervious calculation? That might be for Judith or for you.
Right. So I gave Judith specifications on the VersaCord, it's called. She noted that in the report. That would be 100% pervious.
That's the basketball court?
Right. The wood decking is only considered 50%, even though as long as you have the space between the decking where the water would go to grade. So that's counted 50% for pervious.
And then the turf.
Right. So synthetic turf is counted at the 100%. You put the synthetic turf, and you're allowed to count that towards your pervious requirement. This is the VersaCourt. This is the first time I'm looking at it. We looked at the material specification provided. It will get reviewed at time of permitting separately from the house. From what I reviewed, it appears to be just as permeable as the synthetic turf, if not more so. So I felt it was appropriate to count it at the 100%. But again, the building department will review that at time of the wood style. And it's not going to be real wood, but some kind of synthetic trick is going to be raised and slatted. And so we felt it was appropriate to count it at a 50%.
Because it has a gap in between the planks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pervious. Okay. Okay. And am I correct in understanding that the sort of the retaining wall that has the elevation for the whole base is set back from all three sides by at least 5 feet?
Right. Yes. And that's because of the height, because our code caps the fence 6 foot maximum.
Okay.
We're going to talk about that a little bit later
Yeah.
tonight. But because we count all fences and walls exactly the same, whether it's a retaining wall that has a structural purpose or simply a property divider, caps it at the 6 feet.
6 feet. What's the 6 feet measured from?
Grade.
It's measured from grade. In practice, we measure it from the neighbor's grade, the lower grade.
Okay.
So if your neighbor happened to have already raised their grade because you have a new house next to you and that's what they've done, then that grade. In this case, that's not the situation. So when they set that retaining wall back 5 feet, they're giving up a little bit in terms of recreation space for the home, but it provides more of a gap, and so that the neighbor, because when you raise that wall 6 feet, you obviously don't want anybody to fall over the other side of it.
Right.
So then you have to have a safety barrier, and so what you would end up with is a 9.5 or 10-foot wall and then a fence on top of it to provide that safety barrier, which you're required to for a pool, to keep the pool enclosed, but also, as our building official will tell you later, anytime you raise the grade above, I think it's 30 inches, you have to have a guardrail for safety reasons. So by setting it back 5 feet, they can get the pool at the height that they want, so that the homeowner can walk out from their back kitchen or family room right onto the pool deck.
So on that note, also, because I read the agenda regarding this ordinance he speaks of, where does this fit in? Could that happen where before we go into permit drawings, that should this ordinance pass? Because we had to experience doing the calculations, the additional setback calculations, right? We were one of the first ones to have to do that additional setback calculations. So it came in after. That's why you have it in front of you now. So again, if the ordinance passes, could we go for that revision at time of permitting?
Yes. If the ordinance is passed prior to your submission.
Right, I
and
understand. It goes through here, then it goes commission, back.
Would she have to come back to us to do that?
No.
Traditionally, no, not for rear yard fences and walls. We wouldn't, unless for some reason you made that a condition of the ordinance.
Okay. We thank you
Thank you.
for bringing the new drawing, and you did a very nice job
Appreciate
with
it.
everything. I would expect nothing less, knowing your family and your background, which is excellent. Thank you for that. I'm going to open it now to if there's anybody out there who would like to speak on this. Now is your opportunity. Okay, George, bring it up.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
George
Ne-
Kuslis, 9225 Collins Avenue. I wanted to just react very quickly to the alternative you have there. I think the new one is an improvement. Both elevations are very handsome, but the presence of a gable introduces a new typology into the thing, and the converting it into a hip ties the house together better. They're both very good elevations, but I would support you supporting
The better one,
Yeah.
the new one.
the new one.
Okay, is there anybody else out there that would like to speak? That sounds like a no. We're closing it, bringing it to the board for questions or motions or anything. Anybody?
I move to approve with staff conditions.
A second?
All in favor, say
Oh,
aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Sorry, Jen.
We forgot to, my apologies.
Oh.
Would you like to come back, please, Mr. James McGinnis, Head Chief
What-
Flood Manager,
And
Planning
we'll just
Manager?
note these, we'll just note these for the record.
Yeah.
Yes.
Care, we don't have to revote or anything.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I'm
Madam
sorry.
Chair. Jim McGinnis, building official, floodplain manager, Surfside resident, and registered voter.
Thank God.
Appreciate letting me get my comments into the record, especially on these next two items. Mr. Bravo will appreciate this one. There's a number of sheets marked A2. Only one sheet should be numbered A2. There's about 6 or 7. So I can't direct your attention to sheet by number. I can direct your attention to sheet by the plan. So let's look at the first floor plan. The title, first floor plan. What I'm going to ask for, and the reason why I want to speak, is to help the applicant get their project through permitting as building official. So there's one elevation mark inside the house off the main living area of 10 feet, and it's not using a correct elevation mark. So it seems that they do intend to put the finished floor at the correct elevation of 10-foot DFE. There is no elevation on the garage floor, but there are steps going down to the garage floor, so we can safely assume that the garage floor is lower than the rest of the house. And so it's very important that you put flood vents in the garage, hydrostatic reliefs, at a ratio of 1 inch per 100 square feet of floor area vented, located on opposing walls. That's a very important factor right there. And those were the small but mighty comments I had for this application. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And those are mighty wonderful comments. We thank you. Okay. Ms. Judith Frankel again, please. Going so fast, we forgot what we're doing. 8927 Harding Avenue.
Yes. 8927 Harding Avenue in the zoning district. It's important to note the zoning district for this property, as typically for single-family houses, we see H30A and H30B, and there are different requirements, restrictions for this zoning district. The project includes an accessory structure with an indoor pool, sauna, and gym space. The exterior design elements on the front facade include natural stone veneer panels, composite wood effect, flat wall, large windows, a waterfall feature, and a wood pivot front entry door. The building is a contemporary design with privacy duly considered relative to the location along busy Harding Avenue. There is a secondary structure in the H30 zoning district. There is no limit to the size of an accessory structure, which this building complies with. Grade in the rear yard is proposed to be raised 4.5 feet. This would require the installation of a retaining wall to adequately maintain stormwater on site, followed by a 42-inch tall Florida Building Code compliant guardrail. This is also interesting because it's on Harding Avenue. The neighbor's grade to the rear is actually likely to be higher than the subject property's grade. So they may be able to fit that height in there, but they will have to provide that grade, and that'll be verified during permitting. The residences in H30C have no maximum lot coverage, as is typical in 30A and 30B, and no FAR to comply with. The property does have to maintain a 20% pervious area, which is provided in the plan. There is a landscaping plan showing 6 shade-providing street trees along the front property line with 15 trees overall. Greater than 40% of the species are Florida friendly as required. The project includes a front wall fence of 5 feet in height with no more than 50% opacity. I didn't note it in the report, but it appears as if they're proposing to have a rolling gate in the front, which I don't see any problem with for a single family residence. If they were proposing a multifamily residence with a rolling gate, that might, snarl traffic a bit on Harding Avenue while waiting for that gate to come up. But with a single family use, it's unlikely to have that kind of impact. The applicant is here if you have any questions, and I'm here as well. And the building official also has some comments.
I would like to have our chief building official and head floodplain manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My comments on this item 5G are as follows. The plans are based on the incorrect version of the Florida Building Code. January 1st of this year, we adopted statewide the 2023 Florida Building Code 8th edition. And I'm going to ask the applicant and the design professional to please amend the plans and all future design submittals accordingly. And next, we're going to need a pre-construction elevation certificate for the proposed principal and accessory structures. And we're going to ask elevation marks to be provided at each floor of the floor plans, including the accessory structures. The lack of elevation marks made me at first glance suspect that the accessory structure had uses below 10-foot 0 NGFD. It seems right houseward of the red car on that ground level plan that there might be steps leading up to a higher level that hopefully the gymnasium is located. In that case, they would be compliant, but for the record, I just have this comment that the plans indicate potential occupied areas in the accessory structure below design flood elevation of 10-foot 0 NGVD, and all occupied areas must be above that design flood elevation. And finally, we need to provide flood fence in the garage, which is clearly below 10 feet, as in the previous home, at a ratio of 1 inch per 100 square feet of floor area vented, located on opposing walls. And those are the end of my comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is it Yefim Masarski Architect?
My name is Clem Masarski, Wine Architecture. We've been made by applicant on Harding Avenue.
Your address?
8927 Harding Avenue.
Okay, thank you.
Applicant. If I may, can I respond to a couple of comments? Building official.
In the mic, please. In the mic?
Yes.
Thank you.
When we submitted the submittal package, at that moment, actually the governing code was the FVC 2020. The effect took on January 1st. That's why our submittal date was 12/18. So that's why it would be impossible for us to put the 2023 FVC code. But we'll definitely thank you for the remarks, and we'll definitely make the corrections for the next submittal. Right, 2023, exactly. That's
okay.
Before it was 20, was 12/18.
You just got the thumbs up.
Okay.
Keep going.
Excellent. With regards to the garage, of course, we have the steps going up to the living area, and that's our top of slab is 10 NGVD, so that's where we're on the marks. We've multiple times already discussed this with Judith. We've communicated previously, and we went over the plans, and we got some comments back, and we reviewed that and revised that, and that's pretty much it. If you guys want to go through, can we scroll down to the renderings? Because we've only shown the first page, and I would like to show all the sides if possible. There you go.
Do you have the elevations on the?
Yes, we do.
A14.
This is the elevations. that we have.
And you also might want to clarify the size of the lot.
Well, okay.
It
The
did.
size of the lot is 11,500. That's what
Okay.
we have.
It just gives a better understanding.
Absolutely. And the proposed square footage is 8,100 square feet for the main structure, and we have accessory structure, which is around 745 square feet. We're showing some elevations right here. We're also showing elevation in NGVD as well. Our rooftop goes to 30 feet, and we have a rooftop area, which is shown further. Let me show you the renderings. So this is the main entrance and the driveway. You have a water fountain on the left side with of the accessory structure, the garage. This is the view from the side, all in glass. That's the view from the rear. We have an outdoor kitchen and full
Is that in the Everglades or is that in Surfside?
This is actually
Sorry. Couldn't help
right
it.
behind where you're looking at all the greens. This is the garage area. So there's this Arctic garage that belongs to the building.
No, your
with-
renderings you did a beautiful job.
Thank you. This is a view from above. So we have an access to the rooftop, and the access goes from the outside. This,
3 lanes. Good.
yeah,
Looks good. We do.
and this landscape plans. All right.
Okay.
We will ask you to approve our application, please.
Thank you. We're gonna open it up now to if there's somebody in the audience that would like to come up and make a comment, or if not, you don't have to come up and make a comment. Thank you. We're gonna bring it back to the board for comments, questions.
I guess this is more of a theoretical. It's not particular to this home, which I think is beautifully designed and has a lot of articulation. I guess I'm just confused about this zoning code. I mean, it seems to be designed to yield more of an institutional shape and volume than a single-family home typically sees. So, and maybe we can put a pin in this and discuss it as a discussion item at the end. But I would love maybe a history lesson about another time about why we have why we have no footprint limit, we have no FAR on lots in this for single-family homes.
Right. So the zoning code allows for multifamily here, and there is currently a multifamily. I think it's 3 units on this lot, one building with 3 units in it, and that's what the most return on investment you could get to build on this lot, and that's what we've typically seen for 8851, where they put 8 units on a lot similar in size, and because that's what the code envisions, that's the restrictions. 20% pervious is what you would see in H120 on the waterfront, and is standard for multifamily. But the zoning code does permit you to do
And then I thank you. That's helpful. So this is sort of a little bit of an unusual circumstance here.
Yeah.
And then on the north side, the setback is only 5 feet. Is it not a 10% of the lot width?
It's
Or?
because it's an accessory structure, and because there's not a limit on the accessory. I mean, this is quite a large accessory structure, but the code says the accessory structure only has to be 5 feet setback from the.
I mean, if there were a home to the north, I would make a bigger stink out of this. But because it's a driveway to a garage, I can live with it. But I think that's an unforeseen potential negative consequence if we're going to see more of these in this zoning code. And I'd like to, make a note to maybe we could revisit that.
To restrict it to only multifamily.
Yes, or to look at, separation of buildings if there are single-family homes involved in this zoning code. I think, if a multifamily, I guess they're taking the risk because a multifamily building could be built 5 feet away from their accessory structure, or 10 feet at some point in the future.
Yeah, I mean,
Does it change because it becomes does the actual on the Dade County property appraiser site, does it change its designation?
no. You mean in terms of zoning?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
It's-
I mean, because it's
I'm
basically
saying in the future, if the Arte garage is no longer an Arte garage,
right.
you know, it's a theoretical, like I said.
No, I get what you're
but
saying.
it just feels a little awkward here. So
I thought it was quite adventurous for them to take this lot and, you know, want to create this house. I think it's,
going to do a lot for South Surfside.
yeah. Well, I think it's a bold and it's a good move. I didn't know the specific zoning on this. I mean, Dade County is, I guess, Dade County, but what you do in your own town or city can be different.
Well, it will remain zoned H30C.
Okay.
That does not change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's what I was asking. I think it's it's an interesting design because it's different than a lot of the modern contemporary appearances we've gotten to see. And if it, any other comments?
It's going to spend a lot on window coverings.
Yeah. Well, I think
The
they.
motion to approve based on staff comments.
A second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
Motion, did,
No, there's no one opposed.
okay, motion carries.
Thank you. No, thank you. Before we, thank you and good luck. It was really nice to see a return of some Mediterranean and something different in the contemporary modern world. So thank you for those. And before I jump into the next thing, because we've been changing things around, I wanted to personally make a statement because I don't like to read some of the nonsense that's out there or said. And I went ahead and I've written a little something that I would like to share because this is public and anybody can pull the video up. Before I say it, I do want to say welcome to Evelyn, which is clearly a sign of the times in Surfside, unfortunately. Our loss is somebody's gain, but to see you makes me smile, and we're very happy to see you. Thank you for being here. My statement is about, I want to start with my background, because apparently it's been questioned as well. I am not new to Surfside or Miami Beach. I was born and raised here. I'm a third generation. My family arrived in the early 1930s, building some of the first hotels on Miami Beach. Mount Sinai was founded by a group of men looking for a place for the Jewish physician to be allowed to practice. My grandfather, Leonard Wein Sr., was a part of that group of men who purchased the Carl Fisher's Nautilus Hotel, and Mount Sinai Hospital was born and continues to flourish today. I have been licensed in real estate since 1994. Real estate, architecture, renovation, and development is not new to me. In fact, my personal home purchases in Surfside began before the pandemic, before the past mayor and commission was elected. The Planning Zoning Board collectively is a volunteer appointed position by the current mayor and commissioners. We are not paid. We all have our primary residences in Surfside, and it is unmistakably clear that we love our town and we only want the best for our residents. There is nothing illegal about owning, designing, and developing real estate here or anywhere and being a PZ board member. There is no advantage financially nor a real estate gain in this volunteer position. We are chosen because of our background, education, experiences, and alignment of having our community improve in a positive way that allows existing and new owners, residential and commercial, to come in and have their real estate land and property values improved and not become tired and depreciate. It is stated on the town of Surfside site that the Quote, planning and zoning plays a key role in the look and feel of Surfside streets, buildings, houses, and businesses. That is what we do. This is what happened. Tina Paul was vice mayor in the prior commission, and she appointed me where I sat as a planning zone board member alternate and had voting privileges when needed. It is funny how a person selectively omits the truth of how current Commissioner Fred Landsman and back then the vice chair of the Planning Zoning Board member, Landsman, was appointed by the untruthful former Mayor Charles Burkett III. Here's the problem. There is a former mayor, current commissioner, and former commissioners that insist on lying publicly and in print. Former Surfside Mayor Charles Burkett III, you are both destructive and selfish. You are a darkness that gives no light to our community. Every word you speak, write, text, or publicize through social media networks is filled with poison and lies. Your conspiracy theory concoctions are evil, insidious, hurtful, and mean. Your selfishness has brought people into your world that is filled with your own desire for political gains through your efforts to promote destruction and hatred. As we were told by Dr. Martin Luther King, every person must decide whether they walk in the light of creative altruism or in the darkness of destructive selfishness. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me. And sorry, I don't like to give attention to bad things, but I like to be truthful and honest because that's the person I am. Judith Frankel, Town Planner, please.
So we have 3 ordinances on the agenda. I have a presentation that I did for the town commission when we talked about stormwater retention drainage. I'm going to go through it. Jose's going to do it for me. Okay. There's 2 things to know about this ordinance. It has parts.
Judith, can I read the title? Thank you. Sorry. I know. An ordinance of the Town Commission of the Town of Surfside, Florida, amending the Town of Surfside Code of Ordinances by amending Division 2 Stormwater Management Requirements of Article 2, Stormwater Drainage Management of Chapter 34, Environment, providing for stormwater retention on site for all new single-family homes, amending Section 90-56, fences, walls, and hedges, to establish retention wall standards for new single-family homes, providing for inclusion in the code, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date, item 4A. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. There's 2 parts to the ordinance. The first is Chapter 34, which governs stormwater. Here we go. There's an exemption at the moment for single-family homes in H30A and H30B. The building department, our building official, does a good job of making sure that this is dealt with and addressed despite this exemption. But we were bringing this forward as a way to memorialize it in the code to make sure that this is addressed because stormwater is an increasing issue in South Florida and in Surfside. The ordinance incorporates into the town code the additional requirements for the containment of stormwater runoff on private properties through a drainage plan certified by a civil engineer and submitted as part of a permitted package. So moving forward, which is we're kind of doing informally now, but putting it into the code, all new construction will require to have a civil drainage plan showing how the property plans to deal with drainage and stormwater on their property. And an element of that may be a retaining wall. So then this is just an example. I know you're familiar with all of these. The existing grade and a lot of these new properties, they like to have their rear yard raised because of the the 10 NGVD these houses are raised to, so they don't have so many steps out their back door. The town recently conducted a drainage improvement flood hazard mitigation plan, and one of the suggestions that came through that was to require new construction to add French drains or exfiltration trenches as part of their stormwater plan, especially at the street, to prevent that stormwater from running directly into the town's stormwater system and becoming overwhelmed. Our public works director can tell you the system is overwhelmed with some of these larger storms that we have, and the more that properties can do on site, the better the town system will be. So this is one of the suggestions that came out of that study. This is an example of water in backyards at the property lines. Okay, so again, I know you're all familiar with 9056, fences, walls, and hedges, capping fences and walls in rear and side yards at 6 feet. We don't have anything in the moment that directly requires a retaining wall or establishes any requirements for that. The fences and walls section of the code really is addressing what would be a property boundary, not something that's intended to be structural and to retain water and soil. These are a couple of examples. I cut these out of plans that have been submitted. You can see, because we cap the max fence and wall height now at 6 feet, in one of these examples, you can see they've proposed raising 2 feet with a 2-foot wall and then a 4-foot fence above. So even though we don't have a cap on how much you can raise your grade, it effectively comes to 30 inches. This has to do with the Florida Building Code. Anytime you're raising your grade greater than 30 inches, you need a safety barrier, minimum of 42 inches in height. So in order to come into that 6-foot envelope that you have, the maximum you can raise your grade and the retaining wall at the property line really comes out to 30 inches with how the code is now. What you see now in this ordinance would allow for a 6-foot high retaining wall, and then the Florida Building Code required safety barrier on top of that, effectively having a 6-foot wall with a 3.5-foot rail on top of that. So we're looking at 9.5 feet at the property line.
Would that be 9.5 feet would be the limit, or would it be 3.5 feet would be the limit of the wall? In other words, someone couldn't put a 6-foot wall on top of a 6-foot.
With this ordinance. So what the ordinance says is that you can have a 6-foot retaining wall, raise your grade 6 feet, and then install the appropriate required safety barrier on top of that. So a 6-foot wall with a 3.5-foot guardrail.
3.5 feet. 3.5 feet. Yeah.
The ordinance caps that. Actually, the ordinance as is written now caps it at 48 inches. Because the Florida Building Code only requires 42 inches, I would suggest that as a change in what's in the ordinance now. I just wanted to make sure you all understood what's being proposed. As you saw in the house that was presented earlier on Carlisle, a lot of the new applicants that come in, they want to be able to walk out their back door onto their pool deck. It's less of an issue in the H30A on the waterfront district because we're raising the seawall. So you come in for a new home, you also have to raise your seawall to 8 NGVD anyway. So doing that fill through the back has less of an impact on the neighbors, and there's more space. But in the interior areas, that's what you're talking about, a 9.5-foot barrier at the property line.
I have a question
Mm-hmm.
about that. I noticed that it's measured from the existing grade of the abutting property. Why are we using the abutting property, which could be different on every site, versus crown of road, which is what we use for height measurement.
So the actual language in the code says the ground under the fence, which is not particularly
Which code?
in 9056.
Yeah, the current code.
Yeah. So what it says here, to your size notwithstanding anything contrary, grade is defined as the point of the ground immediately below the location of the fence or wall, which is different from our definition of grade elsewhere in the code. So if you're
I'm
building a-
referring to line 150 and 151 in the ordinance,
Mhm.
where it says, shall be a maximum height of 6 feet measured from the existing grade of the abutting property.
Yes, that's not in the code now.
Right. And I'm posing the question. It seems like that could yield a lot of uneven results just because abutting properties can be at different heights. Why wouldn't we try to measure that to a constant out in the street
So I don't
or
think you can.
I think that language developed. We absolutely could do that because of how we do it now. Because what happens now, because the ground immediately below the grade at the location of the fence, you can have a little bit of variation between locations. And then if you're building a wall, like the grade underneath the wall, it doesn't. So what we do is we just use the grade, the existing grade of the neighbor's property. That's how we interpret it, because measuring the ground below a wall is not really helpful.
May I address the question, just to add a little bit to that? The concept was that this is what's going to be experienced by the neighbor. So what they're going to see is this wall. So we were trying to keep it at 6 feet from where their property is, the grade of their property. So that was the idea behind
Yeah,
it.
I'm wondering, the neighbor decides to tear down and build a new house. That now changes. The wall is now at a different, you know what I mean? Like, I
Sure.
just wonder if it's not worth seeing if we should be tying it to a more constant.
The conversation we
Maybe
had is that if
maybe
you had-
looking at the as built of what the community looks like. Because there's different parts of the community that are going to be. What's the low and the
So it varies, and actually
Yeah.
the crown of the road is usually a little higher than what is on the property.
Right, so you'd have to change the measurements. I think we should be thinking forward to everyone redeveloping their properties. How is
Correct.
this going to be?
With this, we've had this conversation about what happens down the road. So
Right.
say you raise your property 3 feet, let's say, and then the next door neighbor comes in and they're going to redevelop their property. Well, then they're going to start at that 3 feet and then can go up from there. That's why we did it from the neighbors, so that once, if you anticipate all of the grades eventually being raised, you would still want that 6-foot barrier between properties.
but wouldn't this
That raises.
There-
the
they
number.
can go 9
language
feet
wouldn't this
above
they would be
9
9
feet.
feet? Yeah.
Yeah, that
That
raises
doesn't-
it.
I mean, I hope that's not what we're suggesting. I think what we're saying is we want people to do the maximum, being sensitive to their neighbor, but the neighbor doesn't get to go 9 feet above the max that we're setting.
Well, that's how it's written. You cannot.
I don't think that's what we're saying, right? Like if someone is building their let's say they fill the whole lot to 10 NGVD, and then the
Well,
neighbor
no,
comes along to develop their lot, they're going to be able to go 9 feet above 10 NGVD.
I see
6
what
feet
you're
above,
saying, but I
3
don't.
feet with a wall. Yeah.
Right, right.
I see what
3.5
you're
feet.
saying, but I don't think that any of properties, even that are where the physical home is raised, I have not seen any of the new properties that are physically raised where the sides, there isn't some kind of grade that, yes, yeah. I have not seen anything new that, I mean,
There's properties with retaining walls.
yeah, the retaining walls, I understand.
But so if we have a retaining wall, let's say you take that the new 2-story property on the end of Carlisle, the 95, 96 block. I'll just use that as an example. So they've got, I don't know, 3 or 4 foot elevation on the side of the house.
Yes.
So the neighbor goes in to redevelop that 1940s home
Yeah.
into a 2-story home.
Right.
According to what I understand, and I'm probably understanding it incorrectly, but the neighbor can go up 6 feet above his 3 or 4 feet, whatever that is, with his. So he ends up with a 6-foot wall next to the house, and you end up, I don't know, I mean,
I
Does
think
it
the
take
idea
from
to
the
measure
building
6
height? Because
feet
at some
from
point, I
whatever's
mean,
lower.
Yeah, you need to add a minimum or a maximum
Yeah, like
to
spe-
define that someone can't, you're not just stair stepping, as people develop the
I mean,
properties.
at some point, somebody's going to be able to build a basement, without having to dig. So,
Well, I don't think so.
I mean,
Not here.
Yes,
But
if you
I,
have-
I understand
digging
what
because
you're
you
saying, but
you got a
there's,
4-foot lip
eh,
on your neighbor's yard, and then you're going to redevelop your property. Your zero line is 4 feet, and you can go up.
I'll tell you what happens. I'll tell you what happens. That's where neighbors become neighbors. And it's been,
I think we have to be a little like.
no, I think that it's set.
It seems to me like if you just gave a reference like you were saying, and then also put a max so that you have kind of a window that people are building in for now.
So one of the options that is not considered in this ordinance is capping the grade that you can raise. The building official, I think, has some thoughts
Yeah.
about this. I did want to add also something that's not in here is considering what we do potentially for where this has already kind of become an issue. There was an example of a property. They came in, they came for a pool permit, and then they came for a fence permit with a slatted
Right.
aluminum fence. They didn't tell us they were raising the grade. They were only raising it about 24 inches. It's not a big deal, but still their water was just sloping right off their property into their neighbors, and the fence didn't provide any kind of barrier. When the neighbors raised this issue with code compliance, the building official said, okay, you have to do something. And because it was only, I believe, 24 inches, they were able to accomplish that with interlocking pavers. The building official is going to explain that to you a little bit better than I can. And in that case, we wanted to kind of bring that to you about existing places where this is an existing issue, about requiring people who maybe have done some work before this was in the code to comply with that in cases where it's really just a small grade raising to remedy that for neighbors. But I did want to let the building official.
Yeah, Mr. McGinnis.
Speak.
Mr. McGinnis. I understand what you're saying, that we should be writing a standard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim McGinnis, building official. Madam Chair, I'd like to give appreciation to board members LaCour's concern about the old cartoon where they have a grudge fence and they keep building higher and higher on each other's fence up to the sky. That old cartoon we've seen before. However, it could become a theoretical reality in that he who builds last wins.
Yeah.
So the comments of Ms. LaCour are greatly appreciated in that work something into this that gives a maximum height very similar to maximum building height that's related to a fixed point, i.e. crown of road. You may want to put in something that says in no case more than 6 feet above the abutting grade or crown of road, whichever is less.
Yep.
I want to put something in there to avoid your fears. I feel your fear.
And also, we don't want to see slab on grade either. I mean, if someone raises their site, I think we want to see a little elevation off the
Right
so
on. I'm
maybe
gonna address that as well.
Yeah.
A couple of things. That fence on top of a wall, if that fence is considered and proposed to be what's known as a safety barrier for a pool, then that would have to be 48 inches in height. So there's a lot of ways you can construct a pool safety barrier, a lot of different technically approved and building code approved mechanisms. You can put a net across the surface of the pool. That's one. You can put it on the deck, a 4-foot fence that's called a kiddie fence. You may have referred to it as that, and then put alarms on all exits from the home. Basically, it's to keep a child or a person who can't swim or can't see from falling into the pool and drowning. If that safety barrier you propose, and we at a pool's permitting, we require that they designate the type of swimming pool barrier they propose to use and make them, we require them to give us the product approvals so they make sure that they're engineered and approved.
Right.
If they intended that safety barrier, that has to be 48 inches. That is Florida Building Code. I want to let you know that as well. Now, on the drainage, really welcome that we're finally going to get some teeth in preventing one of the most common and most biggest complaints regarding adverse impact on new development for neighboring properties, and that's the displacement of stormwater to the abutting properties. We have been trying to do so in an ipso facto way without having an ordinance that we can really say refer to. But now we're going to develop that, and that's very, very pleasing because we want to prevent all adverse impact on neighboring properties from new development. Sometimes the landscaping ends up being higher than the neighbors does. And we had a case where a brand new house was using pressure treated wood sideways, and I nixed that one very quickly because even PT wood degrades in the wet Florida soils. And they replaced it with very successfully with 6-inch thick interlocking landscape pavers. And for those makes a height of 24 inches, which does not impede on the building code maximum height restriction for handrails. They interlock in such a way they can resist a lateral soil pressure. And it was very, very successful adaptation, and that's why I've recommended to Judith Frankel, our town planner, that we insert that in there. However, on line 57 of that ordinance, I've recommended that you remove the word stuccoed, because these landscaped interlocking pavers are already finished, and you just change those words to be a finished surface to the satisfaction. It's line 57 on your ordinance in your packets, and I recommend you remove the words stuccoed and just put finished to the satisfaction and approval of the town planner. I recommend those items there. 157, correct.
Yeah, I was looking. I don't see.
Yeah, it's in the ordinance. So those are my comments. Any further questions for me?
No.
No? Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Judith, we have what the standard, a house wants to put a fence up. They have their grade. They go and they get their permit. They show what kind of fencing they're doing. 6 feet. They put it on. That's the standard, right?
Yep.
So what are we, I mean, that part is written. What is it that you want in addition? Because from what I understand, we have a standard.
Right, but that standard doesn't accommodate different grades on the adjacency. So right now, the way this proposed code is written, it's tying grade to the adjacent property, not to the existing property that's putting the fence up.
Right. So typically, we have 2 existing homes. They want to have a fence. The grade is the same. So we just measure the height of the fence is 6. The grade is the same. But it's in the case of the retaining wall. And this was my recommendation, is that we have a section specifically referring to retaining wall because it's a different
it's a different animal.
Should be treated separately.
Yeah.
And that anytime you're raising the grade, that it should be, crystal clear in the code that it's a requirement.
Okay, if I recall, we were having discussions about these retaining walls, CBS block, and we had talked about finishing it and painting it. Am I wrong? We had, all of us. You don't recall?
I think the building official's point is that if you're only raising it 24 inches, you can use these interlocking pavers, and it's a lot. I think it's less expensive, and you don't need to finish it because they're just. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I saw them. I know where they are.
If you're building a CBS wall, then it should be finished.
Right, but I think that was something new that was added. Okay. I mean, I still think when you get to a retaining wall, a physical CBS block wall that is sitting on pilings or whatever is required from soil tests, that it's finished, that you already have you're talking to your neighbor, because whether you're doing it 3 inches inside of your property line or you have a neighbor that says, yeah, I'd like the wall, and you say, well, I'll be willing to pay for it on the property line. That's why I keep saying I see it as a standard, but if it's a concrete block wall and you're going to do something at that expense, that's where the communication of being neighborly in my eyes is you want to be able to communicate So there is no problem.
Yeah,
And it
we,
should
we
be,
can certainly.
you know, attractive service to your neighbor as well.
Yeah.
With the pavers, they look actually pretty good when they're finished. But if it's a CMU wall, it seems like you would need to do something to it other than
So if
just
it's,
have a gray
I mean, I
gray
think
CMU wall.
we could make the recommendation that if it's finished pavers, you don't need the stucco.
Or maybe just a finished surface, and then it can be a little bit.
I mean, the pavers are fine. I mean, no one's going to sit there and question it like, oh, you put pavers in and that's your wall and 24 inches is fine. But if you're going to put a concrete block, stucco, finish, wall up, you want to talk to your neighbors, hey, I'm going to do this. You know, and it seems like the right thing to do. And maybe a lot of people don't do the right things, but I think you're going to see a concrete wall if one gets, you know, put up.
We can also certainly, I mean, if your recommendation is to measure from Crown of Road, we can add that in the recommendation.
I don't think it's Crown of Road. I think it's the actual existing property is where.
No, I'm saying the opposite. I'm reiterating what the building official said, which is we have to have a fixed point of reference. I don't have an objection to the materials of the wall, anything like that.
Right.
I'm just trying to avoid this.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
I don't know exactly the best way to do that. Maybe
Okay.
the attorney or the building official does.
Well,
Tony can-
I have two suggestions, but this is a public hearing, so you might want to hear from the public first, and maybe there's some ideas coming from the public.
I think it's also important to finish as well because it is something your neighbors look.
It's on the property.
Yeah, it's on the
Mhm.
property line. So I mean, the finish should be. I mean, I don't think we need to be so specific about the finish, but it should. You know, if someone knows how to lay CMU and they do a nice job and stuff, it's not terrible, but it's still not nice. If somebody does a bad job, it's really horrific. You know, so I think there should be some requirement to have a finish.
Okay. I think Mr. McGinnis wants to add one more.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Jim McGinnis. I just wanted to make the board very clear on the different types of wall. We can have a freestanding wall, which stands from its footer up to the top elevation and doesn't retain anything. A retaining wall is totally, in addition to wind loads,
Yeah.
it has to retain the lateral soil pressure trying to turn it over. And as a result, it has to have a substantially greater foundation,
Right.
which, depending upon the design of that foundation, may encroach on the other property, which would encourage the cooperation of the neighbor. If not, you've got to really design it up on your side of the wall. But when that soil gets wet, it really exerts a lot of lateral pressure against that wall, and it will be required to be engineered by the building department. And I just
Of
wanted to let you
course.
know that.
Yeah.
It's not allowed for somebody to have the foundation go onto the neighboring property.
Not without their consent.
Right.
No,
I
no.
would make it written consent. In any
Yeah.
case, I want to just let you know
Yeah,
about
of
that.
course,
It's very
I
different
think-
from a decorative or even a fence. A retaining wall retains soil, and if that fails, that could be catastrophic. Thank you.
Right, right. I think that anybody that would come with a set of plans and has a retaining CBS wall has to have it engineered properly. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and open this for public comment. I don't know, other than Mr. Kuselis, you've got one on 4A, 4B, 4C.
George Kuselis, 9225 Collins Avenue. Generally, this ordinance is good, but the defect is all in this retaining wall. On the issue of where do you measure it from, I think you want to measure it from something fixed. I think the easy thing is you extend the property line to where it hits the Crown of Road, and you take that elevation. So it may be different on either side by a smidge, but it's only going to be a couple inches. And typically, every survey that's done locates usually the two property lines anyway. So you have that information. That's what I would do with that. On the subject of the actual retaining wall and then the guardrail above it, you got to remember a pool barrier that doesn't have to be the guardrail, but you also need a guard. The pool barrier is 48, so leaving the 48 in the code allows somebody to build a slightly higher fence, and it's both pool barrier and fall protection. Otherwise, you have to do a pool barrier by other means. So that's the discrepancy in those two numbers. But I want you to think of this. Look at this room. This room is just shy of 50 feet wide. It's about 20 feet from the dais back to that wall there, and it's about 10 feet tall. if you're standing in a legacy yard and people build the 6-foot retaining wall and the 42-inch or 48-inch barrier on top of that, this is what you're looking at. You're in a cage. There's no way that if you're going to have a retaining wall and a fence above it, you need to do what you saw in the house about half an hour ago, where it's pulled in from the property line, right? The new homeowner has a choice. Do they want an elevated yard that is slightly less expansive than the property lines, right? As I think the town planner said, their recreational area of the lot is a little bit smaller. Or do they have a lower yard that doesn't need a guardrail and they can go out to the property lines? But to do both, 6-foot wall and 3.5 to 4 foot barrier on top of it, is basically putting their interests way above the neighboring, the legacy homeowner. And we've driven through town. People complain about the new houses, but they are still very spotty and few and far between. It's going to take a long time before this town, everybody elevates. So we will be looking more and more at people enclosed in a space like this in their backyard, and that's just not right. So I would think that's the one thing I would change in this code, plus the where do you actually measure the 6 feet from? That 6 feet off of the ground right adjacent it's been in the code forever. That's why it's there, but I would change it to measure from the ground to road, and then also get rid of the barrier on top of the retaining wall if it's at the property line. You're allowed that 6-foot wall, whether it retains or not. If it retains, it has to be pushed back the way you saw it. So that's what those are the two things I would change. Everything else in the ordinance is good. Come up with more artful language about finishing the walls. I think that was a good catch on the part of the building official, that you're not going to stucco over these pavers here. But anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Okay. Closing it back up to here.
What is, if I can ask the building official, not as the building official, but as the floodplain manager, what would it do if you did pull back that wall? So you've got a 5-foot setback that's at whatever 4 feet or 5 feet or whatever, and then you've got this 6-foot wall, and then you have another house that's developed. It's the same thing. You've got this 10-foot channel in between them. What does that do to our floodplain? Does that just run all the water out into the street, and then we hope that the antiquated storm sewer will handle all that, or what's that do?
Thank you, board member. What that does is create a great opportunity to place infiltration trenches down that 5-foot. We don't have a drainage and easement here on our properties in Surfside, unfortunately, but in my past jurisdictions, it's been adopted. You've got to maintain all the water on your property, and the only way to do that is to turn that 5-foot in what's called an infiltration trench. Right. Mm-hmm. And I've already been able to convince some designers and builders to already utilize some of these to great success.
Could we use exfiltration so it's a little more attractive, and then the wall can stay up?
No, we want it to infiltrate the ground on their property.
I understand, but I mean exfiltration. You can also almost it's more like a French drain, but a little more.
That's how you get it to the infiltration.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So just how you convey it.
It can just capture it quickly during that weather, and then let it seep into a larger area.
Yes, an infiltration field. As I expressed at the last town commission meeting, we had one home builder who took all the roof water and all the storm water and hard piped it into an infiltration field underneath his driveway. And it was extensive, and it worked. It really, really worked.
So I would like to clarify one thing. We have not had what Mr. McGinnis said is accurate. We have not had this is in response to your comment regarding the water flowing out to the street. We have not had that requirement. However, this ordinance, specifically lines 77 through 81, imposes a requirement on single-family homes to retain all their stormwater on site. So you're going to, Mr. McGinnis is going to start getting this as a requirement. He's going to be able to require it, which is a great thing.
It's called an engineered drainage plan as part of the required building permit documents. And keep in mind, that will come into effect for building permits after Town Commission puts it into law on second reading. But in my past jurisdictions, there's been that at permitting, and then an in progress, and then prior to a CO, there's an actual engineered drainage plan inspection in the field to confirm the topography matches the engineered drainage plan itself.
Do you recommend something like that, this infiltration field?
Absolutely.
Can we?
Yeah. Yes, it's.
Could we give a it's not an expensive move. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's PVC pipe. I mean, it's a little bit of labor, but I mean, it's not crazy.
It's not inexpensive, but it's going to solve. It will greatly contribute to the displacement of stormwater from new development to existing properties.
But it's not putting in $100,000 pool. I mean, it's 5,000.
About 5 to 15,000, depending upon the areas and the extent and the calculation. It's actually a surface water calculation that a civil engineer makes, and then provide the appropriate above water table storage for that.
Does it make sense to? I mean, Mr. McGinnis, I trust your judgment, but one day you're going to decide to get on your fishing boat and stop all this nonsense here, and somebody else will come in to. I mean, how do we assure that continues in code?
Well, this is the first step.
Yeah.
Right here, requiring properties to retain all the stormwater on site. Well, that stormwater has to go somewhere.
There are ways to build better retaining water systems on whether the construction is for an existing home with a renovation or new construction. It's easier when it's all new construction to build in and factor in how they can better serve getting rid of the water or using it in a service capacity somewhere else, but on their own property.
What is the guidance for having to maintain your stormwater? If somebody comes in for a permit for not a complete new build, but a remodel, or is there a pivot point where we say you have to
50%?
It's a 50% rule.
No, this would be a new single family home.
Only for new single family.
New single family.
We not attach it to a major improvement, 50% or more?
The key thing is, are they altering the land? When they come in and demo and rebuild, that is the best time to do this. I think it may be a hardship to require it, unless it's a very, very big expansion, and then they're worried about the 50% rule.
Yeah.
That kicks in financially. So that 50% rule stops them from that so much. But I believe this ordinance says new single family residence.
I think is it designated as new single family?
It says here the grading wall properties.
Yeah. I thought it was, I mean,
I think it's
Judith,
when you disturb
is this based on new single family home only? Okay.
Because the drainage plan is already required in multifamily and commercial. Would require that already. So this is addressing the issue in the residential area.
I think you brought up the crux of what I'm stuck on, which is it a better practice to bring the retaining wall to the property line, which has some pros and cons for the neighbor? You get a free fence, right? That hopefully looks nice. You take on 5 feet more risk if there's a failure. I mean, I guess if there's a failure 5 feet away, you're screwed as the neighbor anyway.
Yeah, but there can't be. If you're going to put up a fence.
I understand we have to engineer it.
Yeah.
And we'll hold that standard. But I guess just from a drainage best practice, would we rather have the side setback be grade level, or would we rather have it be filled to be that higher grade from a drainage for the town's perspective? That's, I think, what you were trying to say.
Now you've had experience with new construction in Surfside.
Mhm.
I know how I feel about it. How do you feel about a retaining wall?
I'm fine with it if somebody wants that. I'm asking a more technical question of our building official regarding, is it a better practice to not allow the retaining wall to come to the property line? Is it a better practice to allow grade level for drainage and exfiltration or infiltration? Or are we okay letting, the extreme case is every house in Surfside has a retaining wall out to their property line, everyone's at 10 feet NGVD, and we just have really low roads, right? So that's if everyone built out according to the current ordinance. Or do you want these channels between houses? What is, I don't know the answer.
Yeah,
And it's okay if you.
I think that we should be allowed to place the retaining walls as, if it's 3 inches inside of your property line where the finish outside of the wall is 3 inches inside your property line, I strongly agree on new builds to put that retaining wall there. That's how I think, because I know I've done it with my own neighbors. I'm experienced in doing that. And I think it's a more beneficial thing for the neighbors.
But what happens when the neighbor builds their?
Can we let the expert
Next to
answer the
it.
question, please?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. It really is a board and a town commission decision. There are no, to my knowledge, drainage and utility easements going down the 5 foot on each sides of our lots.
No, it would be the owner's responsibility to put in subsurface drainage.
Yeah, but
in that
what
setback.
what that setback? I mean, great idea in theory by Andrew there, but it'll reduce that to 40 feet, from 50 to 40 feet of that lot. As a floodplain manager, I'm against categorical filling the lot. I don't like that at all, because it really ends up with displacement. But the good news is this ordinance is beginning. It allows us to require an engineered drainage plan by a civil engineer, and he has the challenge of retaining that water on site, and that's not going to be easy, because we have no utilities or drainage easements to convey out to the public drainage system. So you're going to see more and more of these infiltration fields and trenches become standard construction practices by means of necessity. Because you got to pick a, and when we get there, you got to pick up a 4-inch, 10, 12-year event. You've got to design for that in civil surface water engineering.
I mean, you've got so little. I mean, if you compare the amount of road width to the amount of house, which is 220 feet from block to block. I mean, you got to keep that water going in the ground in that space right there.
It's my recommendation that if you require that setback, you're going to get a lot of pushback from the citizens, because you're taking away that much of their yard. And I don't recommend that, but I just recommend great engineering. We finally have something with some teeth going on here. We're going to hold them to principles and practices of solid civil engineering and stormwater, surface water.
But I think it's more beneficial to the block or your neighbors when you do this, that you put up that retaining wall. It doesn't mean that the grade is coming up 10 feet. It's got a...
You'll have a slope. You'll have a slope.
Exactly. And you do want naturally to put in these type of fields. However, French drain is selected to, as the course of design on the property. I think they're important because you don't want to flood your own house out. So if you have proper engineering with your drainage and you have proper engineering of your walls, then you're more likely to have success, because there is no perfect answer. There is no perfect world.
I think the bigger question is what you brought up on a reference height. Do you think we could add that language in?
I was actually just going to make a motion.
And also
see if we could move this along. I was going to move to recommend to Town Commission with all staff comments and conditions, including the and as well as amending paragraph 90-56.1.b regarding retaining wall standards to have a fixed reference instead of the abutting property of the crown of road where the property lines meet the crown of road.
So, yes, so it would be to adjust lines 150 and 151.
Yep.
Shall be a maximum height of 6 feet measured from,
Well, we should check the 6 feet too, because crown of road is
Okay.
typically at 4 or 5, 3.5, 4.5 feet. So it's higher than the grade. So we might need to adjust the 6 feet. So I might not have the
So
exact
do
wording
it from
for you.
GVS. What is it?
I'm not trying to make the allowable height of the wall higher. I'm just trying to tie it to a fixed reference point. So we may need to pull the 6 feet down a little bit.
but your goal is to, sorry, just to make sure I understand. Your goal is to tie it to the older legacy homes
No.
grade. No, well, hang on. Let me
Okay.
let me get there. Older legacy home.
Mhm.
Let's.
I don't. In my mind, I'm not tying anything to this.
No, I got it. I'm trying to say if we're gonna adjust the number 6, that's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Okay. So right now, the current condition, older legacy home, new home, let's say plus 3 over the older legacy home. Then there's a crown of road, right? When you say that the crown of road is at plus 3, what are you trying? What is your end goal? What's the result so that we can figure out what that number should be under this?
I don't know.
The idea.
That's
the- I-
a
the- I- I think
calculation.
at least what I understood, is that if we could have kind of a window where it could be, couldn't exceed, let's say, 8 feet or 9 feet and GVD, and it had to be at,
Yeah, maybe you tie it to NGVD.
6 feet above your neighbor's property.
Because if your finished floor has to be at 10 feet NGVD, and then you have a pool at that finished floor, the maximum should be 48 inches above the 10 feet. I think.
No. The wall can't be 48 inches.
No.
Your retainer can be. I mean, your guardrail can be 48 inches above. Your wall should be below 10 feet and GVD. I don't know what staff recommends. on
Maybe
I'm having trouble with that.
let me ask it this way: if you are sitting in a like Mr. Kuselis' example, right? If you are sitting in the backyard of a legacy home, right?
Right.
What would they see? And then we'll figure out what that is with respect to the crown of road.
Well,
and then we can
I think we could have two. We could have two
standards.
Two standards.
Okay.
That
the lesser
this
of
and
the
this,
lesser
of. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. That's we can do that.
And have, let's say, I don't know if that's 8 feet. I mean, we generally would build up a stem wall or something like that to at least 2 feet above, where we'd have a few steps coming up to the front just to guarantee that you're not going to get water, but maybe it's 1 foot, whatever. So you have 9 feet, let's say NGVD, and then or 6 feet above the neighbor's property, whichever is left. So if 8 feet, let's say if the neighbor is sitting at 6 feet already, and you're at that way we don't end up doing that, thing where we're, the neighbor's going 3 feet above the other neighbor.
If I may just try to summarize, I think what you're saying is to just pick a fixed point. So the crown of road is not going to be vastly different from the property, only slightly different. Most surveys.
It's really not Crown of Road isn't relevant. I mean, because we don't really have to build to Crown of Road. We have to build to NGVD.
The height.
I mean,
the
our
overall
floor
height's
plans are.
probably in that. So typically, like the house you saw earlier on
Sure.
Carlisle, that's at a particularly low spot in town. I think it's like
Exactly.
3.5.
Yeah,
NGV.
depends where you are.
And so their finished floor is actually probably 6.5 feet difference between the crown of road and where their finished floor is.
Yeah.
I mean, so
That would still work with what we just mentioned if that's one of the lower houses. Because if you're talking about 6 feet or less and say 9 feet NGVD, because you're not going to go directly into the house, even if you have you can make on any of these lots a 12-inch
instead of
elevation
using
on a driveway.
the grading at the crown of road, you could just do the grading at the property, because that's going to be.
I don't know how to do it. I just want to prevent this.
Yeah, and that gives us no. But the problem is, Judith, that doesn't give us a cap for the height, right?
Wait.
We don't want the town to have houses
I have
that
a
are,
question.
11 feet NGBD on the yard, and then it slopes up into the house, because
Can
what we did
I-
with the cap the seawalls based on base flood and design flood.
Mhm.
You could do something similar here. Is height of the retaining wall is capped at whatever our design flood is, design floor elevation.
Can I allow to open a floor comment from an architect?
It's your meeting. Yes, you can take some additional testimony.
I mean,
Full circle, Laurie Swedrow. Why not stick to 6 feet? Laurie Swedrow, I guess the microphone's not on. Why don't we just stay with what you have now, which is 6 feet above your neighbor's yard? Because you're both going to have the same elevation.
that's kind of the same thing that you're saying.
And the other
well,
thing
the only problem is you build your site up 6 feet, okay?
right. And then above
Now
that,
your neighbor goes and he says, I'm going to build 6 feet above your yard, and he's on the corner, all right? So now you're
but wait a minute, he's going to build up, 6 feet
above
from
your
his
yard.
elevation.
No, from
No,
yours.
you're saying the code right now is written above your neighbor's yard, so that 6 feet is a moving target. Okay? In other words, every time somebody builds and fills some of their lot, that number changes. So what we're saying is use a fixed number like NGBD, which is what we have to use in order to get our building height for a finished floor or first finished floor. So why not use that and just subtract a number off of that? I don't know. I would recommend 1 foot off of that as the maximum. And then I would say that 2 feet might be more practical, because you're going to have some slope in your yard anyway, to shed water away from the house, and then you're going to want to elevate your house 6 inches, 12 inches, whatever. I think we have to elevate 12 inches, don't we?
Okay.
I really think we need some visuals, and maybe we don't need to finalize it tonight, but maybe we can provide some conceptual direction.
don't
and between
disagree.
now and the town commission, we can flesh it out.
I just have a quick suggestion.
Tony, yeah.
Maybe what if we did 6 feet from the abutting property like we have here, or the subject property, whichever is lower. And that way it's max 6 feet above whichever the lower elevation is.
But why not tie it to a fixed reference point like
That's fine, but we're trying to find that fixed reference point. I'm trying to cut through that.
Calculations we can do with visuals.
But what's the issue with NGBD?
There's no issue other than we can't. The question, the number 6 was first of all, look. There's no problem with measuring it from Crown Road, right? Immediately,
Well, there is, because it's a moving target. It changes throughout town.
Right, but when it changes, so does the height of the building.
True.
Right. So
But your
it matches.
floor elevation is tied to NGBD, so I feel like it makes more sense.
Okay, that's fine. But we're questioning what the number is, and we're trying to get.
So what?
Honestly, so if you want to make a recommendation to figure out the fixed point, we can do that outside of this meeting. But I did want to make the point is that what you're allowing now is not allowed currently in our interpretation of the code. I don't think anybody is going to do higher than 6 feet. If you're capped at a 30-foot maximum and you've got your design flood at 10, there wouldn't be any reason to have a higher retaining wall than 6
Unless you're
feet.
building a single-story home.
What? My Rick.
I think the odds are pretty good that.
These have to be written for like unintended
Well, then maybe that's what needs to be written. If it pretty much is looking like the standard doesn't change on a new 2-story home, maybe the additional language needs to be in reference to a 1-story home.
But even if you built a 1-story home, you still have to put it at 10 NGVD.
or higher.
No.
Can be higher than
You can go higher.
Can be.
So does that mean your retaining wall can be? I mean,
If your house is more, we have some.
What are our limits? Where do we judge the max proof height?
I think once you're at
Crown of Road.
22
Crown of
feet,
Road.
then it's a two-story, even if it's only.
That's the biggest problem. I remember they had this crazy.
What?
They were screaming. They
All
were
right,
much more civil.
Can we let the staff take this and work with it?
So, okay, would your recommendation be to have staff incorporate a maximum height based on
It's
a fixed
have
reference
a fixed
point?
reference point. I think we believe is NGVD, but if there's a good rationale for making it
Crown of Road or something like that.
Right,
Yeah, it's
that's-
fine.
We'll let staff.
and then defining a maximum from that fixed point.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the ordinance is really good, and
Yes.
I'm willing to say let's move it through if we can get a minimum and a maximum with staff going back with a minimum and maximum. So I make that motion. Anybody will second it.
Yeah, I'll second it. So just to clarify, you're making the motion with all staff comments plus the fixed reference point with a max height.
That's correct.
Mr. McGinnis, can I ask you a question?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, the way that the proposed ordinance is written, where do you see a problem with the way that it's written? Do you find that it should be more clear?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair.
Okay.
As
Can
board
you be
member
specific, please?
suggested, we need to fix it to a fixed point, and that should not be NGVD. That should be tied to Crown of Road. What we're talking about, we're concerned about a localized problem. In other words, a legacy home looking at a solid monolith of wall. That's localized. And we're also talking about the potential for everybody to have a site filling competition to have a stepped elevation that gets completely out of control. If we put a maximum limit to be that localized Crown of Road, which which deals with all the homes along that specific road elevation. Don't try to make it uniform for the whole town like seawalls necessarily had to be, because water finds its own level. We're talking about man-made disturbed soil levels, and tie it to Crown of Road as a maximum above Crown of Road. That way you prevent that stepped grudge fence type of thing, where he who builds last wins, because he's going to build 6 feet higher than the neighbor.
The problem with seawalls, because I've always had a problem with this, is if you're going to build a new seawall, there are the requirements. The minimums have to be met. The problem that I have with seawalls is that my neighbors may not want to do any work to their seawall. You know, they're the ones that are going to be compromised because they didn't put the new seawall and cap in. Okay.
Yep.
So
When they do rebuild, they'll have to build up the minimum height, and we're talking about the retaining walls here.
Okay, so the Crown of Road does make sense. There's some delineation of a variety of changes.
That's recommended, and it puts a localized maximum that.
So it doesn't matter
really
where you actually build a new house. The Crown of Road will dictate.
Just like it does the maximum height on the beam.
I'm okay with Crown of Road. I don't have an issue with that. I just think we just need to kind of have a range to try to keep it.
Well, why don't we
consistent.
just put the language in that the Crown of Road?
That's what we just moved, is that we put, that the staff puts in their language, so we have upper and lower limit. We moved to approve with staff recommendations and an upper and a lower limit on that paragraph 56.
Lindsay, I
9 to
think I
56.
see what you're saying. You don't want to see a 3-foot.
We don't want the neighborhood to look like this.
You don't want to see what looks like a building landscape.
Yeah, or like that.
What I don't want to see is if a wall gets put in, that it's so far set back from the property line and the neighbor has to put in a wall and it's so far set back that you end up with these valleys that end up getting no attention, and then you just get a giant mess between the properties.
100%.
So I don't like anything about this. Sorry.
So this doesn't, you can go to the property line with this.
Okay, so why did that new build have to be set back on their
Well,
property?
because we don't have this ordinance. We don't have this ordinance yet. That's one of the things they were asking, is if we pass this ordinance if they can go to permit and make the change on their site, not to have that setback.
Well,
I
how
think
about
that's
on a
what they're-
new
I think that's
build,
what you're-
which I think it's already required, that you have all the engineering and on top of the civil engineering? I mean, aren't we all kind of saying the same thing?
I mean, I think we've made a motion and seconded what we were recommending forward. So if you don't, I mean, if you want a roll call, we can do that, but I'd like to request a vote.
One question. Does that include, you said, for staff's recommendations? I think you heard from Mr.
Yes.
McGinnis, the stuccoed and on line 157 to be replaced with finished on all sides to the satisfaction of the building official. That's part of this?
Yes.
Okay. And then the last thing, Mr. McGinnis made another comment, potentially regarding an engineering field check before CO of the stormwater retention.
All staff comment is
All
what
of it. Got it. All right. Thank you.
Board Member LaCour,
Yes?
Board Member Bales,
Yes.
Chair Baumel.
It's a lot of information. Okay, fine.
Motion carries.
I don't li- I think people should be, I don't want to see moats.
5 minutes. I want to break for him. Take 5 minutes.
Yeah, we're going to take a 5. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Yay. Yay.
Yes, sir. Yes. It should. There's time.
By the way,
Bravo and
On the site plan.
You got all the.
I hope you enjoyed my little.
I thought it was excellent.
Even longer than me. I never did.
I hate this whole element of
Madam Chair, I would
Yes.
like to call the roll.
Yeah,
Chair Baumel,
I'm still here.
Board Member LaCour,
Here.
Board Member Bales.
here.
We have a quorum. We can start the meeting again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we finished that. How many do we have left?
We have two more ordinances to discuss.
Let me read the title.
And the comp plan.
Yes. An ordinance of the Town Commission of the Town of Surfside, Florida, amending the Town of Surfside Code of Ordinances by amending sections 14-102 and 14-103 of Division 3, Indian Creek Bulkhead Lines of Article 4, Bulkhead Lines of Chapter 14, Buildings and Building Regulations, amending Section 90-60.3 of the Code and creating Section 90-60.6 of the Code to expressly prohibit development and construction of any structures within Point Lake except for marine structures permitted by the Code, providing for inclusion in the Code, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date. Item 4B.
Thank you. The purpose of this ordinance is to make it crystal clear what you are prohibited from doing on Point Lake. The ordinance makes clear the prohibition on any development, construction, or structures on Point Lake, including the north and south canals, except for marine structures like docks and seawalls, as permitted in Code Section 90-7. The ordinance also prohibits any floating vessel, platform, or structure that is anchored to submerged lands from being installed in Point Lake or Biscayne Bay. Town administration recommends approval of this ordinance in order to clarify the prohibitions on development for the protection of the adjacent property owners, the general public, and marine life.
Okay, well, I feel inclined to open it up to the public first. They're screaming out there, and I don't see them. I know. Closing it up, right back to here.
As a homeowner on the canal, I just want to say thank you for trying to preempt some potentially very ugly problems here. I'm wondering if, given that that folio shows up in the appraiser's website as zoned for single family or double family dwellings, should we also not consider a rezoning of the parcel?
Which parcel?
If I may, the Miami-Dade property appraiser has some kind of general things on there. They don't actually have our correct zoning for properties.
Okay.
And generally people call and ask me about, RT dash whatever, and that's just not our zoning. Miami-Dade doesn't have our zoning. We could ask them to change that. I don't know how much.
What is it zoned currently?
It doesn't have a zone.
So I guess
the lake itself does not have a zone.
should
I
we
don't
not take it a step further and zone it a park or I don't know. I'm just asking the question.
I think it's private.
Oh,
I
so
think
we
it's
can't-
privately owned.
Right, but we have zoning codes over all privately owned land. So I'm just wondering, I'm posing the question, should we consider adding a zoning code to reinforce this concept?
We could do that. We could create a category. I believe under the comprehensive plan, it's designated. It's a water body, so it's water. It's designated as essentially water. We could while we're cleaning up the ear, and we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. Put it in the comp plan as well, and that way it's it's very difficult to change.
I just want to close any potential loopholes because, as I'm sure you've seen, there are individuals and companies out there that buy these submerged lands and then try to develop them and or extort adjacent homeowners to pay for the square footage of the pilings that they've installed in the submerged lands.
Well, okay, so we're talking about two different things, right? We're talking about two different things because what this ordinance tries to do is regulate or clarify actually the existing regulation that you can't build anything on there except marine structures, right? But what you're describing is an ownership issue, and if there's an owner and if it's private land, even if the comp plan is changed, even if the zoning code is changed, zoned, that will not affect the ownership issue. The ownership issue is its own issue. That's a private issue between private parties, and there may be ways to change that, but ultimately it's a private situation. The town can't get involved in that. It's almost like getting involved in a dispute between neighbors over what can be built and what can't be built on someone else's property. That's where the limiting factor is. So we'll go as far as we can as a town, but at the whether someone is charging for certain things to be built on property that they own, that's not something that we can regulate. But that doesn't mean that owners on the lakeside are without options. They're private. There's private litigation that they can enter into, quiet title, other kinds of things like that.
Are those homes protected?
Homes themselves?
Yeah, on the lake.
Protected from what?
The owner.
No. No, what I'm saying is that
Why do they need to be
there's
protected from the owner?
because the private owner owns all the submerged lands in the lake. Our property line ends, and the water is owned, except for in many cases, this owner was allowing the purchase of your property, of your submerged land at a price up until 3 to 6 months ago, at which point he said, I'm no longer selling the property rights. I am preparing this parcel for sale.
I never heard about
So it's
Well, what can he stop you from doing? What can you not
If
enjoy
you
because
have
of that?
any pilings driven into the submerged lands
Mhm.
for a seawall, a dock, those are infringing on his property.
But is that grandfathered? I mean, if it's already in, and I mean, is there any
Yeah, if they're already in, there are challenges under the law that, again, they're private challenges, right? You'd be claiming something like adverse possession or a prescriptive easement to have those on their property.
Mhm.
That's how you would push back on that. But I think, yeah, that's not something that the town can get into.
Understood.
Kind of amazing that no one from Point Lake. I mean, I don't know.
It sounds like you guys need to collectively get an assessment together and.
I would be, well, I don't think it's just a question of them collectively getting together and buy it. I think that the people that have ownership of it has been for so long that I think it's bigger than
But it's not a
the
town.
of
It's not a
Surfside.
town issue. Yeah, it's not a town issue.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm ready to move this if there's no further discussion.
Yeah. I move to approve with staff conditions.
Second.
Board Member Bales,
Yes.
Board Member LaCour,
Yes.
Yep.
Chair Baumel.
Yep.
Motion carries.
Wow. And that's
Next ordinance. An ordinance of the Town Commission of the Town of Surfside, Florida, amending the Town of Surfside Code of Ordinances by amending Section 90-62 outdoor lighting to provide outdoor lighting regulations for single-family residential dwellings, providing for inclusion in the code, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date. Item 4C.
yes.
This new ordinance proposed requires new construction or renovations to provide shielding to outdoor light fixtures in the single-family district, specifically to prevent light from spilling onto neighboring properties. Outdoor lighting plan will be required for new construction or renovation. Motion sensor activated lighting for the purpose of safety is excluded from this requirement. The town commission talked about this at couple meetings, and in the multifamily districts, there is lighting ordinances about where it talks about light spilling onto neighboring properties. We didn't have anything in the single family district, so this remedies that in a way that we feel is simple to comply with for homeowners and property owners.
Okay. I this is 4C, right? And I think George, you wanted to jump in on 4C.
Yeah.
Don't sit down. Come on up. You're the next. Can't you?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hold on one.
4C, this is the lighting.
You guys move fast.
We do. We don't waste time.
Okay. So, George Kouslis, 9225 Collins Avenue. This is a much needed ordinance, but it's taken a while to get it so that it's useful and effective. And that's why you see so many crossouts and strike-throughs in the ordinance you have in front of you. There was a lot of stuff in there that was well-intended, but maybe a bit unwieldy. Other stuff that kind of very difficult to work with. Why is this a very needed ordinance? Well, as houses get taller, their lighting gets higher. Quite often it's now placed in the soffit area of a lot of roofs. It's beginning to become an issue for neighbors. So in the multifamily zone, there is a lighting ordinance. In the single family zone, there is not one at the moment. So this was an attempt to try and bring some control to the light wars that are coming. One of the most important aspects is to shield the lights. Shielding means that you can't really see the source from, let's say, the property adjacent or the street. You can see the light that it casts, of course, but you can't see the source. You don't see a glaring bulb, lamp. The lights in this room are pretty lousy lights. But
Let's just give it to them.
But down lights can be deeper and more recessed so that they do. Here you see a lot of white discs, bright discs overhead, because these are fairly cheap lights without much depth to them or any baffling. So shielding can happen in a number of different ways, but you want to hide that light source, the lamp, the light bulb. There's other stuff in here that's been crossed through, but if you do keep any of it, just to keep the terminology straight, lumens, foot candles, and lux. So lumens are the light output of a light bulb. That's why you often see it on LEDs and compact fluorescents, because they need to give you an idea of how much it's actually putting out, because we're all familiar with the incandescent light output. So a 20-watt bulb puts out the same incandescent, for instance. So that's lumens. Lux is just the metric equivalent of foot candles, and that's the light that is hitting an area. So in multifamily, it's usually measured at a half-foot candle at the property. What they do in those projects, they produce a photometric. You've probably seen them on the larger projects you look at, and that takes all the lighting, site lighting that the building has, and basically a computer generates a photometric plan of a lot of tiny numbers that eventually fall off as you get further away from the light. That's customary in all jurisdictions for multifamily. You could do that here, but I would keep it just for new construction. It's an engineering analysis that you don't want to put on somebody that's doing an addition or whatever, but that is how you would measure light at the property. They would create a signed and sealed document that represents the foot candles they're intended to meet, and that's their obligation when they build it. But the ordinance you have in front of you, the way it's been modified, I think is generally quite good, and all the strike-throughs just give you an idea of all the different motions it's gone through to get to this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to close public because I don't think there's anybody else sitting here. I'm bringing it back to the board.
Is there, did you want to say something?
I do. I wanted to know, in this proposed ordinance for recommendation, it's talking about lumens and all of that stuff. However, is it talking about the color of light? And the reason I'm saying that is, when you have the holidays like Hanukkah and Christmas, you kind of anticipate seeing colorful lights, blue and white, and red and green. However, when the holidays have passed and people's front door lights or garage lights go out, and they put in these very beautiful colors. I just want to know if there's any kind of ordinance in town that says, please don't put pink light bulbs in or something of that. I'm not trying to pick on pink. I'm saying a color.
That would be a good color to pick on, I
This-
think. And I would want. Is there anything in the ordinance about, not just that, or the colored light in regards to that, but I mean, like using 2200 K lighting for sea life and all that stuff?
This ordinance does not regulate light intensity, light color,
Okay.
heat. It
Yeah.
does not. It merely says shielding of fixtures
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
and then requiring an outdoor lighting plan.
Yeah, I think this came up as a result of some new constructed and high-powered lighting.
I
But-
think your color point is a good one. I would love to get to the Kelvin, but I think if we could just say white exterior.
well, yeah, any
or-
shade
or
of
some
white. I
shade,
mean,
you
there's
know.
blues and whites
Yeah,
and
but
yellows
that's
and
the
whites.
Kelvin, right?
Yeah.
So they can pick 3,000, they can pick 2,000 Kelvin, but let's keep it white on the exterior.
Thank you.
And then can we get the new homes that are in blatant violation of this new ordinance in conformance in any way? The ones that are built and are currently shining light into their neighbors.
Probably reducing the luminaires.
I'm just saying legally, because right
Oh.
now it doesn't apply to them.
It would be very difficult to do that. I mean, it would have to have retroactive effect, and you're looking at, I think we'd have to set up a process to be able to challenge or so that to avoid someone taking it, challenging it in less friendly proceedings, we'd have to provide some kind of like a vested rights procedure almost. It's a little more complicated than that. I mean, can we do it? Potentially. I think we'd have to like really work through that.
Well, that would
If you
probably.
want to recommend that the commission consider that, then you can certainly do that.
What if it's not something that the town goes after, but if a neighbor?
Yeah, that's where I was going, is let's let the neighbors make their
Determine.
case to the town if they're having a problem with it, and if it bubbles up, then I think we should try to do something retroactive. But when I drive around town, and unfortunately, it's this example of the house that's been stamped out several times that looks the same and has the same light fixtures on all of them. So it's, that's one of the challenges with letting someone just kind of repeat the same mistakes again and again. But so I mean, I would be in favor of recommending this forward with the addition of a limitation to white light on the exterior. Any color of white light.
That's going to get into some problems down, and I mean, that's going to say that people can't put up colored lights for Christmas.
No,
or,
No,
or
no.
for Hanukkah. and
That's
stuff
the
like that.
opposite.
Those
I'm
are
saying you
excluded from this.
you anticipate that you get someone who wants to put blue and white Hanukkah lights up. You get somebody that wants to put red and green Christmas tree lights up. That's not part of this. What we're saying is,
Fixed.
yeah, like your coach lanterns and your, I mean, stuff that doesn't actually change. During the holidays, it is and can be different. But I'm just saying, regular, driving around at night and you see a house with, green, purple, yellow, and hot pink lights. It's not
Do
a
we
holiday.
do we have this? Okay. Anyway, I move to.
Well, I already have a
Oh,
motion.
you have a motion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need a
didn't-
second.
It's the ordinance with staff conditions and my recommendation, or the recommendation to limit exterior fixed lighting to attach to the home to white lighting.
I second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Yeah. No, I
That
mean,
was an aye, not
it's-
a nay.
that was an aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Aye.
Okay, so we're.
I didn't get a chance to get to my mic.
No, we've
Now we
got
have one more.
discussion.
We have,
Okay, the next meeting is February 29th. Just to let you all know.
And then 7.
I might be here.
Yay.
Let's see.
We're hopeful that you'll never leave. You'll come back.
7B is your next item.
Yeah. No, 7A, right? 7AB.
We're actually we would like to present to you 7A at the next meeting. We left it on the agenda because we weren't sure when ready, but we would like to present the next meeting and just
Would it be possible to get whatever you're presenting for that next meeting with the packet?
yes.
Okay.
And also some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, we would like to email you them after this meeting for your further review.
Can I ask you something? I fear that these design review guidelines are not ever going to get pushed through. Am I correct at this point?
They're going to be presented in February to this board. I believe that's the thought, and then where it goes from there. It'll be up to the commission.
For purposes of my minutes, because they're going to defer 7A, can I just have a motion to defer it to the next meeting?
Motion to defer 7A to the February P&Z meeting.
Does that rule out doing a?
It just simply means that potentially,
It's not
if
going to
we
make it
have
on this
any,
thing.
it's
Yeah.
exactly my.
Well,
So why don't we just do it?
let me clarify. These design guidelines, the way the code is written, are adopted by resolution, not adopted by ordinance.
Yeah.
So it takes one meeting of the commission.
It's only one. We don't need two.
Only one.
Okay, touche.
So just letting you know that there's.
Okay.
So
That's
there
fine.
is one meeting after our February P&Z meeting
I believe so. Yes.
for the election
Yeah,
in
I
March.
believe so. I believe so.
Because that's,
that's the intent.
importante. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah. And just so that we're all clear, it can also be modified by resolution. So
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, 7B it is. Can't wait.
You're also going to get the comp plan in February too.
Cat got your tongue.
Just for the record, I'm Walter Keller, Marlin Engineering, consultant town planner. Tonight, I'm going to present 4 of the comprehensive plan elements to you. And we mailed out to you the hard copies. Let me say this is sort of it's a difficult task, these comp plans, because the way the law is written, we have to do strike through and underline. And it makes it a very voluminous document, and it's hard to correct because the comp plan is somewhat long in a lot of ways. But it's not the most exciting thing to read strike through and underlines. So what you have and what's been sent out to you is a draft. It's not a final document. There'll be probably some more edits on it, but it's sort of the major part of those 4 elements. And I don't expect there'll be a whole lot of changes. It's just more changes in format, and there might be some typos. The comprehensive plan, you'll be functioning as a local planning agency, and at some point you will recommend to the town commission and give any comments you might want to do on the draft, and then the town commission will hold consideration of it. They do a first reading, and then at that point it gets sent out to state agencies to be reviewed. Comes back with maybe comments, recommendations, and possibly objections. And at that point, then the town has something like 180 days in which to decide what it wants to do and you're required to address any objections, but then the object would be to adopt it on second reading. So the current town plan has 10 elements, and 4 is what I'm presenting to you tonight. One of the 4, the property rights element, is a brand new requirement of the state legislature
and it's very long. It's one page. And what's presented on that one page is the absolute bare minimum requirement to meet the law. And that's what I would suggest you adopt. We don't, on something like this, recommend you put a lot of extra stuff in it because that gets you in trouble sometimes. The future land use element, for the most part, is going to stay pretty much the same. What changes in the plan is some of the technical documents, such as the existing land use. When it was done back in 2018, it was based, I think, on a 2010 existing land use map. So the map, this was all based on, say, 2022 conditions. So, in looking at the existing land use, what I saw is the town is undergoing an awful lot of redevelopment. I know that's no surprise to people that live here, but the old plan talks about the town is almost completely developed. The town is completely developed, and it's going under redevelopment, and it's very active and significant redevelopment. We also talk about the future plan. On the future plan, we're required to do a 10 and 20-year plans. So the future plan would be like a 2044. We might just round it off to be a 2045 at the end, just to make it a little easier sometimes on population forecast. But the only thing's changing in the future land use map, which is very important, is 2 of our parks we're changing to community facilities. And the reason we're changing them to community facilities, like the current community facility, it's a recreational facility, but it's also a community center. And under the 2 parks, the 96th Street Park and under the Veterans Park / Surfside Tennis Center, there's proposal to put some new structures on that site. And in order for it to meet a possibility of the design, it needs to be a little bit higher. So that's why we're moving both the 96th Street Park and the Veterans Tennis Center into this community facility thing. But it just allows the town to have the ability to build a little higher facility on that site. That's the only change in the land use plan. Earlier tonight, it was mentioned about the idea maybe with Point Lake of doing something, and that might be something that we might want to do to show it that it's a body of water and it doesn't have any land use other than a body of water.
What about on the Flum? Excuse me. What about on the Flum parking? Anything regarding like additional city parking that we can, including structured?
The land use plan, there's no changes in any of the parking that I know of. I basically did the same sites that were in the existing future land use plan. My knowledge, there wasn't any change in any of those. And there hasn't been any change in any of the, say, requirements that go with those sites. There's a few changes to the goals, objectives, and policies. They're generally fairly minor. But like I say, the biggest thing in the land use plan is the designation of the 96th Street Park and the Veterans Park Tennis Center to be community facilities. The housing element. The housing element is basically a document that's prepared to show you what your housing conditions are and to help you try to address maybe low-income housing, moderate housing, or housing deficiencies. In this current plan, most of the updates that I've done have been oriented to the dwelling unit types, housing vacancy, housing tenure, and population numbers. There's an awful lot of tables in the housing element that deal with a lot of housing characteristics. And because there are some difficulties in the census, I'm just not going to update them at this time. It's a lot of work to update them, and it doesn't really give you any. I
It
think the
stops at
information's not
2020,
that
right?
exciting.
It stops at 2020, right?
What?
All your census information stops at 2020.
It's a right now the way it's around the 2020. What happened is the 2020 census had issues in it, and so
Everything
No, but I mean-
does. Yeah.
I've worked in planning for a long time, and my career started doing population demographic stuff with a county agency, and it seems my whole life has been waiting for census stuff to come out. I'm sick and tired of it. It never comes out, and it seems like so. A lot of the data that's in here,
Yeah.
and that's a survey that's done every year by the Census Bureau, and they survey 2.5% of the population and the housing units and that type of stuff. So because that's such a small sample, the American Community Survey puts 5 years together so that you then have a 12.5% segment of that area. And it actually is very good. It's coming up with housing characteristics and population type numbers. The difficulty in it, you can't fix a time exactly on it. But in the housing element, I like to say a lot of the tables that deal with the low-income housing, the affordable housing, housing costs, mortgage costs, rent, and all that stuff, I'm just not updating it this time. I'm leaving that to the next time. On the recreation and open space element, this element is actually, I think, sized really nice for the town. It's only like 7 pages, and it basically covers the parks that are within the town. The importance in the recreation is that we have a level service of trying to have 6 acres of park for every 1,000 population we have. Because the current projections on population seem to indicate that the town's going to lose 979 people by the year 2045 as residents. We do very good with our level of service for park because we could have up to almost 6,700 people and meet our park requirement.
So the change of those two properties, land use to community center, doesn't impact that?
Doesn't have any impact. They still count as recreational
That was the only thing
facilities.
I was.
Yeah. But if the population ever, say, went beyond 67, then we would have a deficiency in the level service standard. So that's my quick presentation of this. I would hope that you can look at the stuff. I also did a more detailed thing of what in the comp plan, the changes and stuff that we'll send out to you. The next time, I'm going to show you some more elements, and we'll try to get to a point where we can have a public hearing, and if the board is willing, recommend it move forward to the town commission. I'd be happy to answer a lot of questions, or a few.
I actually read it, and I think I responded with how impressed I was with the amount of information that you compiled.
Chair, we
Yes.
need to open up public comment.
Yeah, I know. I
Thank you.
was just amusingly happy about the amount of information he supplied. Mr. George Kouslis, I'm opening up to public information. You get 30 seconds. Joking. You can have 1 minute.
George Kouslis, 9225 Collins Avenue. As you heard, a lot of this is pretty dry information. But I find like the housing section to be fascinating because what you'll find if you look at it, it's a big condo boom where the town really just burst out of the seams was in the 90s. Not in the aughts, not in the teens, not now. I don't know what it means. It means that buildings were denser then, you know, the Solomars and such. But it's interesting when somebody complains about recent history that, in fact, that decade was really when Surfside transitioned from mostly mom and pop motels on the waterfront to something else. The only other thing I wanted to bring up, which I always find curious, I'm not sure it's a bad thing in Surfside, but it is a curiosity, and that is that down here, plan is a noun, and in other places I've worked, plan is a verb. So you've heard about the future land use map, and it pretty much, other than those two properties, looks exactly the same. Typically, when planning is done, you look at how the world is today, how it will be changing, what you need to do to deal with that change over the next 10 years, 20 years, et cetera. And you keep on positioning yourself to be as successful as possible moving forward as a community. The future land use map really hasn't changed in decades. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's a curious thing, that static thing. I'll paint one example. I'm not endorsing this, but people might look at the 2-block long commercial stretch and they say, well, there's growing tourism here, there's growing this, there's growing that. There is pressure, and the world is moving in another direction, and maybe it's time to update the future land use map to move southward by a block. Now, I'm not endorsing this, and there are people listening at home that are going to say he's, wants to make the business district bigger. I'm just using that as an example as to how planning usually works. They say, what do we need to do? We're bursting at the seams or we're not, but things are changing. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because when you look at this document, it's really more of a, basically an updating of facts as they exist. It's not so much planning. And it's not Mr. Keller's fault or our town planner's fault. It's just the nature of the beast. You're given this document that really wants you to update the numbers, whether it's when houses were built, how many people occupy them, that kind of information. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm closing up public comment. I'm bringing it back.
Can I ask you, how do we get, first of all, who actually sets the criteria for the FLUM?
Well, the state, there's a chapter in the Florida statute that lays out what goes in a comprehensive plan and what items have to be in there. Then there's some certain elements have to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
There's some optional elements. It sort of tells you what has to go in there. Over the years, they've loosened it up a lot, which I like a lot. Originally, when this was done in 1989, everybody had to do their comp plan. And the documents were about like this. Mm-hmm. And they treated every community exactly the same way. So if you were, say, Hialeah or Jacksonville, you did the same thing that Surfside had to do. And it was a very difficult and frustrating planning experience. I think I was doing, at one time, I was doing 7 comprehensive plans. And they were all different cities and different sizes, but they all had to do the same thing. And so a lot of times it didn't apply. And then the state took it that they were very firm. And so the first reports I got back from the state, it was something like 150 pages of comments. And then they require you to redo the year every 7 years, and you'd have to redo the plan. And then the document, while it was this big, the ear was like this. And all the people that sat on the board said, what do you expect us to do with these hundreds of pages? So they've softened it up now, and now the plan still has to have a lot of these things in it, but the local people can now make it fit their way. And so, while I think your plan's very good, I think it's too big for really the town. It doesn't have, I think it would be better if it was smaller and said the same thing better, rather than be so voluminous.
Well, I don't mean, I guess the point of my question was, does the city or the commission or the P&Z, or how do you get comment for it? For instance, my comment is that we need much more parking downtown. You see constantly you're going to Harding Avenue, someone stopped in both sides, which basically leaves you one center lane because they're dropping somebody off or whatever, because there's no parking, there's no place to pull over. And at the end of the day, how do we address that? And I think the FLOMA is part of the solution, either to widen roads or to put on-street parking, on parts where we don't have, or I don't know what the solution is exactly. I mean, I think that's why we hire you. But
I think the question you're bringing up is a very valid one, but it's something that's probably not generally addressed in the comprehensive plan.
Right.
It's addressed more in like a local specific master plan.
Yeah.
That would be done, say, for the downtown area, like a parking study, or a redevelopment plan of like the downtown, where you would look at things like that. The comprehensive plan, this is
I'm not talking about. I was talking more about the future land use. Like if there was areas that we could open up.
Yeah, but that would be the specific to the town and creating an ordinance or.
But we can't create an ordinance.
Well, no, I mean, like they could come up, for example, they could say, every day of the week you can only drop off on the east side of Harding between 4 and 5:30 p.m. If they wanted to create something,
or truck deliveries or things like that.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be in the comp plan, though, right?
The FLOME outside of the comp process, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean,
All right.
Yeah.
So just
But yeah. You want to say something first? No. I was going to say to your conversation, George, was, being from this area and watching architecturally and what the trends were at the time. Like if you study from First Street, all the way up to 96th Street, and then you keep going north, obviously, you can see what was going on during that time period. And that's always been one of the fascinations I've had with not just history, but, how these areas, which is including Surfside, were shaped, and how the trends happened and where we are today, how we got here. It's all interesting. And to me, it's all historical, even architecture, going from First Street to 200th Street. You can see what period of time something was built, who the architects were, what the trends were. And, like you're saying, with the buildings, they might have been more densely populated, but that might have been during that period of time, say in the 70s or the 80s, that they were building smaller units and smaller closets and smaller bathrooms, and if you go back to some of these houses, even the little Surfside houses that have lower ceilings, and people might have been shorter, progressively, people may have gotten taller. That's all, what I think about when I look at your plan. I think it kind of piggybacks what you're saying, but I think it's all trend. And I think it's really important that we see what's going on and where we are right now. I mean, where we were and how are we going to improve it is really significant. Like Andy will say, we have a genuine parking problem, or George might say, well, what have we thought about expanding the commercial district and, maybe be able to add a floor to have apartment rentals above the commercial sections, just futuristic thought, which is all planning, comprehensive future land use and planning in the town. So, it's interesting. I don't have the patience that you do to do all that work. The marketing and the statistics are really interesting when you've completed them. I like that. But I think I think it's good. It's good stuff. I don't know what role we have in reviewing it other than that we just review it.
Well, I would say one area that the goals, objectives, and policy is an important area. I went through and did sort of a cut of. I changed a few things, not very many, but there are. And if you get the chance to look at it and see some of that, you may see some things. Well, maybe this doesn't apply, or maybe this should be changed.
You're the expert.
Well, it's.
I know what you're saying. A fresh set of eyes.
I mean, I think reviewing what you redline, and I actually find the red line helpful, or the black line, because I see what's been changed. I don't think, I mean, you highlighted pretty much in what your remarks tonight, the most significant changes. I think it's pretty minor.
Well, I think the plan, when I looked at Surfside, and I've been here now 3 years, and what I see is there's a very significant redevelopment thing going on that's very positive. I mean, people want to come here, and people want to develop here, and it's, to me, it's very productive and busy. It's not like stale. I mean, I've been in some communities that you say, well, we did something over there about 15 years ago. Surfside moves much faster than that, but it's a place that people want to come, and they want to enjoy here and live here or visit here. So that's what I see in looking at what's going on. And I think when I see the comp plan, and the reason I don't see a whole lot of changes is I think people sort of like the way things are, but that doesn't mean that there won't be changes down the road.
I like the forward thinking. I mean, it's for whatever it's worth. You know, George, you talk about the commercial district. I mean, I too, after reading this, had thoughts about the commercial district. I mean, I'm not even talking about the residential district, because some of these houses are not worthy of renovating. They can't possibly meet a 50%, FEMA guidelines to get renovated, But I think about what you were saying. I thought about that as well after going through it. The commercial district is something can be improved.
So next month, we'll bring back some more comp plan, and we'll bring back the design stand.
Can't wait.
Neither can I.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Yippee-yi-yay.
Motion carries.
Yay.
Right.